On today's episode of Dyad in the Force, we are going to be devoting a large chunk of this episode to books. We are going to be talking about our favorite picks, recommendations, and of course, the benefit of books and comics to the larger Star Wars universe. We'll be talking about one of the newer books that are coming out for the High Republic, Rising Storm, and of course, reacting to the latest Mandalorian finale. This is Dyad in the Force. What's up, guys? I am your host, Element 7.
I'm Darth Draco, and today's going to be awesome. We're talking books and comics. We have a special guest who is another creator who is a big-time reader. I'm so stoked that we found her. This is Alex. How are you doing today, Alex?
Hey, I'm great. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
The finale has raised a lot of old questions that I get to answer again on TikTok. But for those who don't know who you are, this is at whythxfriend on TikTok. Just briefly introduce yourself and tell people what kind of content you make.
Yeah, so I've started on TikTok making little Star Wars book recommendation and some mini vlog style reviews, getting into the canon that Disney has set forth since 2014, trying to get as many fans on board and into the books like I am, basically.
Cool.
And that's how I found you guys.
Yeah, that's how we found you. I mean, like...
Well, yeah, you found me.
I saw your videos about book recommendations. There's not a lot of people talking about books. And yeah. I know when I make videos about information where I get my information, a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't know this existed, or like, what books do you recommend? Even to this day, I've made several videos, same with Chaco. And you will as well find that as many book recommendations as you make, there will be someone in a later video that's like, where do I start? And I'm not just like, I have a video, but here's...
Yeah. I have a video, but I'll tell you again.
Yeah.
It's easy to forget that, let's say you've been around for a few months and you may have doubled in size. So yeah, there's a lot of people that haven't seen those earlier videos, and it happens.
That's true. I mean, today, just with the whole advent of the finale, I'm getting a lot more Luke stuff. Retconning Luke, fixing Luke, all of those comments. And I don't know if you've seen any of it, but it looks like that's going to be the next 2 weeks for me, is responding to that stuff. Have you gotten any
just
of
in your
comments?
latest TikTok, every question I saw was like, what do you think about Luke?
Yeah.
Do you like it?
So our first topic of this podcast is, of course, books. We've been talking about books, and especially our top picks for the last 2 or 3 minutes now. And just briefly, tell everyone what you think the benefits of books and comics are compared to the larger universe of Star Wars.
I feel like it's a great way to kind of control how deep into the lore that you want to get. So, of course, any fan can just watch the movies, and you're a Star Wars fan, you can learn what you want. But I love how you can really go in depth and go into a character's mind if you want to with the books, especially the comics. It fills in a lot of gaps that people are constantly asking questions about that they just don't know exist. It's a really good resource, I find, for just information and to continue the hobby, because we only get movies every couple years.
Yeah. And I love how you say to hop into the mind of the characters, because to me that's the biggest advantage is now we get to hear the inner monologue that these characters are. I know we were just talking about the Thrawn book recently, and hearing Thrawn as he's talking to someone and watching their body language and seeing, his eyes see a little bit into the infrared spectrum, so he can see how part of their face will heat up, their cheeks will get warm at certain mentions. You can't get that. You can't act that, and as well as there's just a lot of limitations that we get between like a director's visions, between their budget, between what technology is available, and you have to be able to tell this whole story in 2 hours or so, but you have zero limitations. It's just imagination when it comes to books and as well as comics. So it's just great.
Even the novelizations of the movies kind of help you to get a little bit more in the mind instead of just focusing on the one character. It really does go into that B plot of the movie. So I think that's brought a lot of people into reading books, is just, the Force Awakens to the Rise of Skywalker novelizations.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'll largely echo what you all have said. I mean, I think the biggest advantage of books is your imagination, right? I mean, like when you're watching a movie, we have these budgetary limitations and we have story and time constraints and stuff like that. But with books, it's largely relegated to how you can imagine this scene playing out. And when you read the books, you have the creative freedom to just see or create the film in your mind. And I think that's the biggest part for books. And definitely, like Chaco said, just a lot of budgetary constraints and time constraints, whereas a book, you can literally spend a couple of days with it, depending on how you want to consume it, if you want to nurse that book a little bit.
Greatest graphics card around is right behind.
Absolutely. It's got infinite CUDA cores, right?
Yeah.
So moving on to our top picks, since we're talking about books, let this be cemented forever in time that this is our recommendations. And anytime you have these questions, refer back to this podcast and then read. This is the best advice I could give everyone here who is watching, to just read. There's a lot of books, and it's always tough for me to kind of like pick what person should start with, because like it all depends on like what timeline they're interested in. Like, so I have a different set of books for people to read for each timeline. But yeah, give us your top pick, your number one pick. What would you recommend most of all, despite timeline, despite their interests, for books?
I absolutely love the book Tarkin by James Luceno. And which is funny because I don't care about the character. I didn't really care about Tarkin as a character, and I was lamenting like having to read the book when I started, but then it turns into like a hunting book with him on these ancient grounds, and how he's dealing with and teaching and domesticating these animals, and then that plays into his psychology and politics and dealing with the rebels, and like it gets real deep real quick, and you're like, whoa, like what just happened here? So I really love that book. Do I recommend it to people? No.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with Thrawn, right? Because like you kind of only see Price in Rebels, but then when you read Thrawn, it's just like it's a whole nother layer. It's pretty cool.
Exactly. But if I'm telling anyone to read, and they haven't read anything, Lost Stars. All the way.
I knew you were gonna say that.
You can't go wrong with it. It's an easy read. It's excellently crafted.
It's an easy read, but it's not like a basic read. It is technically the young adult, but it's a big honking book.
Yeah. And then just real quick, as far as the comics are concerned, if you want something really short, the 5-issue Lando comic is surprisingly good. I really love the Vader 2015, but it's hard to follow because it goes in and out of Star Wars and then changes to Vader Down for like 3 issues. The 2017 is much easier to follow, and so that's.
I was gonna say I like the 2017 just because it picks up after Episode 3 when he's just become Vader.
Yeah, that's the most popular timeline to follow, so that's the first comic that I recommend.
But the whole 2015 Star Wars line of the comics that you said goes in with Vader. I think it even goes in with Dr. Aphra too, or maybe I was reading Dr. Aphra at the same time. But that's also a great arc, and it's something that I think a lot of fans would be interested in because, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it between 4 and 5? So it's kind of that where Luke is just kind of learning, and you get to see a lot of the training that we missed in that year between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back too. So it's a big one, though.
It definitely helps to read the Star Wars comics in tandem with Vader. especially now. Star Wars and Vader 2020 are both kind of coinciding with each other. But yeah, it's an awesome, like, comics, man. You just keep up with all of the comics, and then it gets easier from there. I know it's hard to catch up to all of it, but you can't go wrong with them.
That's something I'm actually struggling with myself. So I'm all caught up on books, but it's the comics that I fall behind on, whereas my Dyad here is always up to date on the comics. So it's pretty cool.
We make up for what the other lacks. That's what the Dyad is, man.
Can't listen to comics. They don't have audiobooks for some of them. Of course, they did turn the Dr. Aphra comic into an audiobook, which I think the novel comes out in April. So if people are interested in that, they can't read it. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because in that, it's the same story, but it's all told from her perspective. And I kind of like that as an angle that Disney has been leaning into. We have just gotten 2 different from a certain point of view books, one for A New Hope and one for Empire Strikes Back, as well as there was a Clone Wars book that just came out, and a few of them are stories that we've heard, but exclusively from a certain person's perspective, which changes the story quite a bit. And there's also one new story at the very end. So
yeah, that's kind of in line with how life works in real life, right? Like, perspective means a lot, especially when it comes to, like, anecdotes. You know, different testimonies from different people will just not match each other, and so it's fun to explore all of these points of views from different people of the same story, because then we get, like, a lot of people will have like an outlook of how this story played out from the movies, and you know, the common trope, right? The audience projects their information onto the characters, and the characters should be operating with that information in mind. And we're like, no, Haldo doesn't know Poe is a great ace pilot, right? Haldo just sees a subordinate soldier and puts him in his place. So Alex, what's your top pick and your recommendation?
Okay, so yeah, going off of kind of what Choco said, I also really love Lost Stars, because that's what the first book I recommended in my first video, where it takes place, you know, from before the original movies to a little bit after the Battle of Jakku. I think that's a great one because it gets your mind going to both sides. There's someone who works with the Empire and someone who is a rebel, but also I really like the 2 Leia books. I really like Claudia Gray in general, but especially Leia, Princess of Alderaan, because we don't really get to see Leia before A New Hope when she's this, you know, diplomatic person. She's going off on this mission, and it helps us to see kind of how she is with her adopted family and why she is the woman that she is. But I also like it because it introduces us to Holdo. So for people that are totally thrown by Holdo in The Last Jedi, it kind of gives you, again, that little bit more of perspective into why she is the way she is and why she would have looked at Poe that way. So
Millie Bobby Brown. Millie Bobby Brown for Leia, young Leia.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
And Holdo's a great character in that book. They actually, when they shot The Last Jedi, they did try it where her personality is more similar to she is in the book, where she's a little more hippy dippy.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it didn't play on screen, so which is
I didn't know that. That's
understandable.
interesting.
So I guess my top pick for a book, you guys touched on Lost Stars, and you mentioned Tarkin, and we talked about Thrawn. Thrawn's a bit of a tougher adoption or an upsell, but I do still highly recommend Thrawn. I'm on book 2 now, and man, I think I'm just gonna like blaze through all of these books because it's just so good. The more I read. But my top pick for anyone who is interested in this large gap that we have from Return of the Jedi to The Force Awakens is Bloodline. And I know we're kind of like, man, I think we're all on Claudia Gray, like, hype train right now.
Yes.
But she is just an amazing author. And this book is just... Okay, so it's probably a small caveat. It's very political, but it's political intrigue, and you may not like it, but I would highly recommend it because it's such a great in-depth look into how the New Republic operates and just kind of the obstacles that Leia has to face even after the fall of the Empire. You know, she has politics even in the New Republic where there's no emperor, there's no kind of scapegoat, so to speak. There's no scapegoat for anyone to fall back on. Everyone is kind of responsible for their own votes and their own actions, and there's, you know, I don't know if there's any like one-to-one real life comparisons, but like we've got the populists and the centrists, and I'm sure we can make some kind of Venn diagram as to where they align in our politics. But it's an interesting story with Leia, and if you are a huge fan of Leia, definitely a book for you to read if you want to know what she's been doing, what Han's been doing, for sure. Leading up to The Force Awakens is definitely a great book for you guys to read.
And surprisingly, I'm not, because I'm not a huge like politics person, and even still, I'd still recommend the book because of the view that it has, is having one person from each side, and like they don't like politics. They're just like, oh god, we have to deal with it, like. And so, even that part of it, I think, is enjoyable, whether or not, you know, you're into politics.
Yeah. And in Lost Stars, it's kind of that Romeo and Juliet-esque type of story with, you know, their relationship. But I find that in Bloodline, it's almost like the Romeo and Juliet, but with the friendship between Leia and then Ransom Casterfo, the other senator, and kind of how they're on opposite sides. And he doesn't agree with her, she doesn't agree with him, but they do kind of work together in a sort of way. So it does have those kind of that dynamic of a relationship too.
Yeah, and it kind of like it's a wonder to kind of see that despite the fall of the Empire and despite the declaration of a new republic, things have largely remained unchanged. You know, they still have their Senate hearings, and they have you know, someone who's recognizing certain senators from different planets, and they're still bickering over small time politics and small time issues that turn out to be rather larger issues, but that's of course spoiler territory. But definitely all of these books are great recommendations for sure. If you are interested in reading or starting to read, Lost Stars for sure, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Bloodline. I know we're like super biased on Leia right now, and Claudia Gray, but I just think it's a testament to how great of an author she is. And I'm doubly, you know, excited for Claudia's book in the High Republic. If you guys are just, these are some of our picks and some of our recommendations for books if you ever want to get started in it. But do we have any honorable mentions that we want to briefly touch on? Any kind of books that, if these aren't your meat and bones or meat and potatoes, you can kind of go in another direction?
I was also going to say, I don't know if either of you have read Last Shot by Daniel Jose Older. It's Han and Lando, and there's a couple other characters too, but that, I feel like if people are, you know, original trilogy fans first, it kind of, again, it jumps around in the timeline, but it shows, it was originally I think a solo, like a release before the solo Star Wars movie, but you do get a lot of that information between, again, the relationships between Han and Leia, what's going on with Lando and L3, his droid, and there's just a lot going on there too. I think that's a very worthy read as well. Also a great audiobook if people prefer audiobook.
I need to add that to my list.
And you get a brief cameo by a little baby naked Ben Solo running around.
Uncle Wandwo, he says. Uncle Wandwo.
It's quite adorable. If basically there's something for everyone, you know what I mean? And let's say you prefer audiobooks, well, you can grab the Ahsoka novel, and that's read by Ashley Eckstein, so you hear it in Ahsoka's voice. That Clone Wars one that I mentioned also has all the voice actors from the Clone Wars that read their specific parts. A surprise jump out was Captain Phasma. The Phasma book. It's a weird, like Mad Max style, like gaunt around this like weird place, but it worked, and I don't know how. But there's something for everyone. Dark Disciple, Master and Apprentice.
Yeah, I was gonna say Dark Disciple as well. But like, of course, if you're also like a short story reader, from a certain point of view, books is absolutely a great read as well. You get a lot of really great short stories, you know, and of course, different perspectives. So yeah, but moving on to the new stuff, High Republic. Now, before we get to the meat and potatoes of the High Republic and the topic we want to talk about next, Light of the Jedi, I believe we've all read the first 8 chapters. Just briefly, where's your excitement level at with this book? And where do you think the story's going to go from here?
It's interesting because I purposely, when I started reading the excerpt, I didn't look at anything in the synopsis. I wanted to just go into it. So as soon as you start off, I was getting into every character. It's written by Charles Soule, who does a lot of the comics, and his writing also pulls you in the same way that the comics do. But I think it's going to be really interesting. It's a very fast-paced read. It seems like it's something that I imagine when it comes out, we can kind of just shoot through, because it does have that edge of the seat kind of thing going on, especially within the first couple chapters that they released. It has a little bit like of a countdown, like 3 hours to blank. I don't want to give it away necessarily, but it really puts you in it.
Yeah, like you said, it comes out of the gate real hype. And it introduces you to this new time period, these new characters, there's this new world, but it doesn't ease you into it. You dive in with both feet, you know what I mean? Like it's cool. I started out by first I read the 8 chapters, but I've also looked up, because on the website they've posted a bunch of High Republic ships, and because I just had to see what they look like.
Oh, did they post the vectors?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I have to look at that.
Yes, the vector is so cool. Charles Soule, while is excellent author, well, he's not like my favorite Star Wars author. Just this first bit just really sucked me in, and so yeah, I'm game on. I will be reading it as soon as humanly possible.
Yes.
So
Amazon pre-order.
we all will, I imagine. I mean, Charles Soule is more or primarily known for his comic runs, and it's interesting to see a larger novel-sized feature for him. And what I loved about Light of the Jedi is just this sense of dread and terror that isn't tied and associated to the Sith presence. Yeah. You know, it is something that we don't typically see from a Jedi angle, is like they're peacekeepers and they're warriors, they're fighting Sith, they're fighting wars. But this one, they're like firefighters. And it's really interesting to see the new powers that are being explored in this. You know, we touched on this briefly in our Light of the Jedi segment in Dyad in the Force, but man, like a network, like a blanket. This is just like battle meditation all over again, and I'm just interested to see where we go from here. And for sure, day one reads, I may very well read it all in day one. But we also do have another book coming out by Cavan Scott, which is not a sequel, but it is supposed to add to Light of the Jedi. It's called The Rising Storm. Although not a direct sequel, Scott says his story will add to the events of Soule's novel. The Rising Storm sees the Nihil take their reign of terror to the next level, building on their appearances in the Light of the Jedi and beyond. Standing in their way this time are newly elevated Jedi Council member Stellan Gios, Padawan Bel Sedifar, an intriguing new character, the Saber for Hire Ty Yorick, who he's had a blast creating. Ty Yorick is a Force-sensitive monster hunter with a mysterious past. What is that past? Well, that will be telling. I mean, come on. Right out of the gate, it's just so we know that the Nihil is going to make this huge presence in Light of the Jedi, and it's going to continue on to Rising Storm. Just take it away, Chaco. I know you've been wanting to talk about this particular reveal, but I think I know where your mind is headed. This monster hunter,
Saber for hire. It's cool. It's not something that we've really explored in canon Star Wars, and especially here, in the High Republic, right? These are fighters on the frontier. So yes, we do have our Jedi, core back on Coruscant with that temple, but they are just reaching the Outer Rim, and they have outposts so that they can help these little places. And so you have to wonder, like, what does this all entail? Obviously, they're not in constant communication with back home, but there's certain issues like if you require a monster hunter, I have so many questions. This could, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do? Like a Rancor comes and starts tearing down your town, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna call 911 monster hunter or whatever. And I gotta know more about this character, on their stance. Saber for hire doesn't necessarily require them to be force sensitive. Mm-hmm. There's so many different possibilities with this.
And Alex? It's so cool because this is going to be something that, again, is new to all Star Wars fans. It's its own little entity, so we're all getting to experience it together. And it does kind of have that more almost like a Western feel, or just because it's, it's still in a galaxy far, far away, but it's a little bit older technology than we see in the original series and in the sequels too. So that'll be interesting. I'm also very intrigued by the lightsabers on some of the artwork that Disney's released, especially the lightsaber that Stellan Gios has, that kind of similar in shape to Kylo Ren's, but it doesn't. I'm just very interested. I can't wait for the merch to come out.
it's like a more elegant solution to what Kylo Ren had to do, right?
Yeah. For a more elegant age, yeah.
But Yorick is force sensitive. A monster hunter definitely screams like, the Drenger is also a prevalent villain in the High Republic. So I'm wondering if like monster hunting is an actual profession that is elevated above bounty hunting in the High Republic era. And just like having a saber for hire, we have mercs for the Jedi. Like the Jedi are hiring mercs, and they have lightsabers. So I'm wondering if like, the sentiment we get from the fandom where it's like not just anybody can use a lightsaber, but we have one who is, well, she's force sensitive, but it's a saber fire. She's not a Jedi. Like, what does that say about, like, I guess the loose restrictions back in the High Republic era?
Well, we'll have to see exactly what she's tapping into and how it's being used. But this also now makes me want I need like a Witcher 3, but but with lightsabers.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how many Easter eggs have been sprinkled in the books that have come out within the past year or two too, that we'll realize are throwbacks to the High Republic, similar to how you see little things like in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic, you see the holocron that has the main character from Light of the Jedi. It'll be interesting to see, because in the Master and Apprentice book, which I recently started, they're talking about the prophecies of old and kind of how the mythics of the Jedi were in the past, and it doesn't specifically say the period, but just from the kind of overview of the High Republic, it sounds like it could very well come from that period, or of course Old Republic, but it'll be interesting.
But I mean, since Claudia Gray is working on both, I would be shocked. We were shocked if she didn't, but yeah, when we might find some Kybers that are not Kyber.
Yeah, there's a lot of implications with the High Republic era, kind of adding to the overall mythology of what we know now. And just like with like Dooku Lost or Dooku Jedi Lost, we heard about the Bogan collection and all of this old stuff that we only briefly glimpsed in just passing. But in the High Republic books, we could theoretically get all of these things, like these old artifacts and old relics of the Jedi that would have been ancient in the prequels. And some that could have been lost in between High Republic and the prequels, like the scriptures that contained healing. I know it's a huge point of contention for a lot of people, but I mean, even in Legends, healing existed, but that's another can of worms. But I'm just overall excited for just how they plan to, because if the Rise of Kylo Ren had a holocron of Avar Kriss, just how far back have they been planning this integration of the High Republic? And, well, of course we're going to have Yoda and how he connects everything, but it's just, it's a fascinating time to be a Star Wars fan, and at the advent of a new era, a new timeline. I'm going to be the first one to say it. The first person that I need a movie from is Avar Kriss. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, what is the over and the under on that lightsaber gun making an appearance? wasn't that based on an ancient design as well? And that also appeared in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic. You see that kind of in that room. And yeah, I definitely want. I don't want a movie. I want an animated show from this era.
I'll take that too.
But this is peak Jedi, right? So obviously we know that the Jedi were failing during the time of the Republic and the prequels. I wonder if we are going to see the rules and decisions that they put in place that led them down to that path. And we'll be able to draw a straight line through there. Also, I want to find what ancient things they find in there, because that'll be fascinating to, like, oh, this is 500 years old, and you're like, wait a second, this is like, I mean, Yoda was still around then, but but still.
Yeah, I mean, so this, I think Light of the Jedi, the first novel, takes place 232 BBY. That is such an amazing kind of like revelation to think about. You know, when people find artifacts and relics, especially Luke in the sequels with Lor San Tekka, and he finds relics of like an older age. When people in the High Republic find relics of an older age, it'll be even older. And we may even get some like Old Republic nuggets. Could you imagine if like in Light of the Jedi, there is a small passing mention of Revan and Malak, or any, like, just expanding on the fact that they are canon in name.
In name, yeah.
And giving us just a passing mention of their story, canonizing even further. Like, they just happen to just two characters in Light of the Jedi or Rising Storm are just shooting we're just talking shop, like the water cooler, right? And they're talking about the hyperspace wars and just like going into small little details here and there. This is incredible. I'm more excited now than I ever was. Thank you, Choco, for pointing out that older stories could come out of these old stories.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I mean, we might find a passing reference to the Prime Jedi, to the Jedi, or to Zepho, which I really hope Zepho and Zepho spheres from the game that came out
Fallen
recently.
Order.
Yes, from Jedi Fallen Order. I hope those, make an appearance as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting implications for lore, for sure.
And with the Visions, the show that's coming out too, didn't they say that covers, I want to say like 25,000 years of Star Wars history, or some big number? I don't remember the exact number, but I bet we'll be seeing. No?
No, yeah, they did.
Said that.
Okay.
They did.
And I like blocked it out of my mind, but I remember very clearly because I didn't understand it. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah. And then she moved on. I was like, wait, no.
We're still reeling from that. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to run past that. Like, you didn't say what you just said. Yeah.
And I think that's as far back as we have in canon, right? 25,000 BBY. There was a mention of like, I don't remember.
As far as they went back in Legends. Yeah.
Isn't that?
I feel like in some of the comics they've briefly like given the furthest back history, but obviously not very many details.
Dawn of the Jedi was there, right? 25,000 BBY with the Order of the Daibendu. Do you remember?
I believe so. Yeah, I recently reread that book, and I believe it's about 25,000 years prior. So,
wow. Yeah. Oh man, this just makes me. Could you imagine the first piece of media I get of canon Satil Shan is an anime? That's like two of my worlds colliding in such a great and amazing way. Okay, so I hate to improvise and call an audible then. So Star Wars Visions. I think I'll elect to cover this more in depth in a future episode, but just for now, initial impressions. If you had the green light and the stamp, as you like to say in your podcasts, what anime would you like to see from Star Wars Visions? 25,000 years of history at your fingertips. Mine's Satil Shan, of course.
Well, first of all, I love Audible, so feel free to always call them. Because it's a...
This is not sponsored by Audible.
Can we have our money now? Yeah. So when the way you said that actually made me think the opposite of what you were going for, where I thought like, what anime would I like to see have a Star Wars flavor? And
tell us about that too.
To which my mind actually went to like Naruto, because we could get a bunch of younglings training and trying to learn how to, and they're having their own little competitions with each other and learning about this deeper world. And like, I think that would actually be really, really solid. But if we're doing things in, that animated form factor, I gotta go with Bane. I mean, I'm always gonna go with Darth Bane, because we have the Brotherhood of Darkness versus the Army of Light. How could you not want to see that? How could you not want to see the thought bomb animated and learning, going into these Sith temples and stuff? I feel like that needs to be animated to make it as eerie and the big scale that we would want. Mm-hmm. But that's just me.
Definitely a fan of what Star Wars can do in an animated form. It's kind of similar to how we were talking about how books can be the best budgeted movie ever. You can get that kind of with animation too. It can be a lot more than just a set. But I don't know as much of the old Republic type of stuff that you guys are mentioning. I've heard of it. My husband's played a lot of those games, but I'd be interested to know kind of more of the lore of the world the world between worlds. In any point in history. I'm assuming that the Ahsoka show is going to touch on it a bit, but that really interests me, especially.
I think you blew both of our minds. Well, okay, I'll go first. Like when you said
we're going to say the same exact thing, so it doesn't matter.
When you said world between worlds at any point in time.
Yeah, I feel like it needs to be, since these are going to be one-offs. Mm-hmm. These could be stories told by the Wills and shown to us through the world between worlds. We can see all these different time periods and things, and I'm really happy.
That's a great pitch for an anime. Going into these portals. Mm-hmm. And if we and I saw a video. I forget who did the video, but they did line up the Chain Worlds Theorem diagram in the Jedi Scriptures in the Visual Dictionary with a map of the galaxy, and the Vergences line up with all of the planets that are Vergences. Lothal, Dagobah, the Force planet all of it lines up to that Chain Worlds diagram. I'm just like, boom, 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 the last week. Oh, man.
The Star Wars mythology gets bigger and bigger.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And so, like, these are virgins, like, gateways to the world between worlds.
So can we, I recall, I must be slipping here. I know in Legends, right, there was a Sith temple underneath the Jedi temple on Coruscant. Has that been officially brought into canon?
I don't think so.
Because in the World Between Worlds episode, right, we do see the markings above the portals that are being used, the markings above the one that Ahsoka comes through match that temple. It's the same shape as that Sith holocron. The markings above it, right? The markings around the one from Lothal is the Loth Wolves, which actually was his portal. And the one that Palpatine looks through has the Sith symbol on top of it. Where does Palpatine live? He lives in the temple. I know. I think that might be canonized, and that is the virgins, and the virgins are the only places where they can be open. And if you open one, you technically open all of them at the same time. I have a whole lot of more thoughts on this, but
it's gonna be a ride. No, I'm sure that there's gonna be a new game opportunity. I'm thinking about what the whole franchise can do. New gaming opportunities from it too. It's gonna be a good time.
Oh man! Instead of a KOTOR remaster, it's KOTOR, Knights of the High Republic. I would love that game.
And the graphics they could do now, it looks good already. But
just give it to BioWare, please. I need Mass Effect dialogue choices, and I need to be able to romance. Okay, so on to our main topic of this episode. This one's a doozy. Mandalorian Finale. If you have not seen it, spoiler warning. Go and watch it and then come back and watch this discussion. The Rescue.
It's kind of, I feel like a lot of thoughts that I have been rotated amongst the fandom recently, but it was a lot of the things that I didn't expect to see. I feel like this season of Mandalorian, I didn't have super high expectations. I enjoyed it, but I never was like setting the bar, and it kind of went, every single time it went out of the box of what I thought it would be. And even what I had hoped it would be, I was really, hoping for maybe Ezra, maybe Quinlan Vos. I was hoping for all these different things. And when a couple weeks ago they were talking about rumors of Sebastian Stan as Luke, I was like, no, I don't want to see Luke. But as soon as he got off and he saw the green lightsaber, I was just like filled with excitement. Kind of like it was the feeling of watching a Star Wars movie for the first time is what it kind of felt like to me. It was the beautiful cinematography. And I'm glad that they just did a CGI of Luke at this point. But I don't know. It was a very emotional episode. But I internalized a lot of that. I feel like a lot of fans have been like weeping and sobbing. And I did shed a tear, but I didn't have as outward of a reaction besides just like joy and excitement. But it definitely leaves a lot of questions, which I know you guys have been getting questions about what this means.
I definitely internalized a lot of it for sure. I know a lot of people have been bawling in response to the episode.
Mm-hmm.
I had, because I posted my reactions, and people were like, how come you weren't excited to see Luke? And I was like, it's not that I wasn't excited, it's that I was processing. Yes. It was like, I just how my brain works. I always try to like figure out all the possibilities, and then which ones are most likely, and then which ones I want the most, which ones I want the least. And then this threw a brand new variable, and my mind was just like process like I was like Garrus on Mass Effect, just always calibrating. Sorry, I had to. It was for his benefit. I will say, like, it was an amazing ride, and I love a lot of things that it did, but I woke up the next morning because I was trying to do a whole recap for season 2 for my podcast, and in the process, there was a couple things I felt a little empty on, but I don't want to be the downer, so I guess I'll leave it at that.
I'm sure we can discuss it, without being downers. I think we have to welcome all of these thoughts and acknowledge them.
It's very true, very true. I try not to insert negative when there's already so much of it, but a part of me felt like we needed more true character development from. Yes, we did get some good stuff, and Grogu finally got to see the face of his space dad, and that was a beautiful moment. But that found family aspect is very prevalent through all of Star Wars, and beyond that, we don't know anything about Din. Yeah. We know more about Mayfield than we do Din, and so while I was elated and fist pumping through the episode, I realized a lot of what I'm fist pumping is my nostalgia and the fan service parts of it, which were really cool. Mm-hmm. I feel like there could be an argument made that we got a little bit more frosting than we did cake here.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that argument. I definitely, your thoughts in particular, what you just outlined is definitely valid, and it's definitely not negative. As I say in all of my videos, when people mistake me for a shill, is that I have criticisms, and I've acknowledged those criticisms. Now I've just chosen to celebrate Star Wars again instead of, kind of relegate myself to this negative space and just remain there for my entire life. And so I do acknowledge those thoughts. It's definitely a concern that they have to, kind of address moving forward with The Mandalorian. I think a lot of his character development and his progression throughout season 2 was largely based on his misguided notion or misguided religious upbringing. It was first introduced to us in season 2, right? We found Bo-Katan, and that was his first kind of run-in with reality, that this is not the only way. Bo-Katan is in fact a Mandalorian, and you were subject to an upbringing around a cultish extremist way of thinking that doesn't necessarily align across and universally with all Mandalorians. And so I think for now, with season 2, his character progression leading up to the helmet being taken off was a huge step for him. Mm-hmm. And I think in season 3 there's a lot more room for the writers to explore more intimate details about Din, like outside of this is the way and how he operates within the creed. So, and this is where I'm going with like my predictions for season 3, but we'll get to predictions in a bit. But
you mind if I interject one more thing?
Sure.
And this is kind of a question for more for Alex, because I don't feel like I'm the person to comment on this, but they split up into the 2 teams, and as badass as it was to have these ladies getting it done, when I thought about the characterization of all of them, mm-hmm. I feel like they all almost have the same personality.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. We're missing certain nuances of it, but I feel like they all fell into the same badass. You
mean like lady. Fennec, Bo-Katan, Casca, all those people felt the same, and Kara, of course.
Personality wise, now they did play it like a D&D party where you had a tank, you had a sniper, and then you had 2 mobile DPS nukers, but I don't know. I don't know.
I'm almost seeing like this season, of course, like everyone's personal journey. It's not linear. It's not point A to point B. And I feel like in this season 2 of The Mandalorian, the progress we're getting in Din's character is a little slower because a lot of it is more internalized, and so we're not getting as much from those other characters, other than, of course, like you said, Mayfeld. But it's really those inner workings of his brain and his connection with Grogu that almost feels like it's a little bit of like a clutch that he was relying on this whole season. And so I think that with Grogu no longer in his possession, we might see a little bit more of, obviously he's started to take off his helmet more, but I think we will start to see more progress in his character other than that, because I feel like he relates to Grogu in a lot of ways because he was a foundling, which was not answering your question about the characterization of women, but
No,
I
that's okay.
think
You don't
that
have to.
just wasn't the main point. That's just how I took it. I didn't personally notice that and feel offended by it. Yeah, no, so I was saying I didn't personally, I didn't notice that, honestly. I feel like because they're all kind of working towards the same goal at this point, they kind of do all have that hard-hearted kind of front to them to some extent. But I think it's, for me, I just take that as like the goal that they're working towards. Of course, they all have separate goals, but in a way, they're all against the Republic. So they are working towards it in that way. So I don't know. They were pretty sidelined, but it wasn't in a way that felt like a personal diss, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. By the way, this is just me, trying to do a full recap, for my podcast, and listen, when I look at this and kind of divorce all the really awesome action moments and stuff I've always wanted to see as from joining in, was just kind of what I noticed.
I kind of get where you're coming from, Chaco, and I definitely see where Alex's point of view comes into play. And I was definitely on the line of thinking with Alex. It's definitely there's a lot of it that happens in Star Wars, product of circumstance. They're a boarding party, and they're largely just in a situation where they need to be offensive, and so it doesn't really allow them the room to kind of create that dichotomy between each of their personalities. I know that there is kind of like this inherent difference between them that is distinguishable in a much more nuanced way. It might not be like something that is, at the forefront of everyone's thoughts, but I've always pictured Bo-Katan to, even though she's a warrior, to have a sense of pride and purpose that separates her from someone like Fennec Shand, who is also a warrior, also a great fighter and soldier, who is just serving her own purposes, her own ends. And, it's kind of seen in the end credit scene, right? She just kind of sits beside Boba Fett and drinks boba milk tea. But Kara, I think Kara is kind of like the most one-dimensional, in my opinion, out of all of them, simply because, I'm also not the best person to kind of make this kind of verdict, but she has been sort of characterized in a very linear fashion, where she only really is valuable to Din when he needs muscle, when he needs the tank, as you said. These are all very valid, issues and criticisms that we should acknowledge. And of course, when it comes to these Mandalorian discussions, it doesn't always have to be, us blowing smoke up their patooties, as I try to avoid expletives. I think we need to address something. It is the bet.
So the bet, man, and all of our bets keep hitting these weird gray areas. But I was betting that we would end up in an antagonistic scenario between Din and Bo-Katan over the Darksaber, which is, okay. But that's not but it hasn't happened.
Yeah, they haven't shown us that really.
And it likely won't happen. At least I don't think it'll actually happen. Or I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
well, I think specifically you said that your bet was that Gideon was going to use Grogu as a bargaining chip.
Yes, that is true. That is true. And in that, I am wrong. So I will pay up.
Oh, it was a real bet. It was
yeah.
A real bet.
Oh no. That was the bet of I want to remember. I'm trying to recall the specific wording. And that they were going to work against each other. I'll pay up. Pep can bring that footage, and so you can watch me put my foot in my mouth live.
I think, just long story short, he said that Gideon was going to negotiate with Bo-Katan and say, all I want is the child, you can have the Darksaber. And so the Bo-Katan would be antagonistic to Din to kind of help Gideon just get the child, I believe, is just like the overall of it, But yeah, I Venmo in the bio. So we get to the point in the episode where I think most of people's tears have been attributed to for the past 2 days now. Red 5. This lone X-Wing showing up out of nowhere. Bo-Katan's like, identify yourself, and Luke was like, no, I'm gonna be mysterious. I didn't want it. I didn't want it. Narratively, I didn't expect it. I think there were a whole host of different Jedi that made sense narratively. And I kind of wanted them, like, my initial wants for this finale was for them to push the opportunity to explore other Jedi in the galaxy narratively and flesh out their stories, and just please, like, take us away from the Skywalkers finally. You wanted it to be the end of the Skywalker saga. And this was an opportunity to kind of put the kibosh on the Skywalker seeping into every single story, no matter how far removed it was from Palpatine and the First Order and the Empire, or the larger gestalt of the Empire. But when we got it, I was just like all for it. I was in it. I saw the green lightsaber, I saw the glove, and I knew we were about to see Prime Luke. And when the Dark Troopers turned around and we got that railed shot down the hallway, I was like, we are getting a hallway scene for Luke. And that was just amazing. I do want to throw it off to you guys to discuss Luke, but I just want to say really quickly, I gave the CGI a pass.
I think it was worth it to have, I mean, eventually if they are going to do more with Luke, they are going to have to cast someone else, but at the same time, I think I would have been more upset if it wasn't Mark Hamill, especially for what was a very brief scene. I think it was important that it was him, just like they used the CGI for Tarkin and for, Leia in Rogue One. Do you think, when you were talking, I had a question. Do you think that the way that they wrote this episode, they knew how it was going to end with Grogu, but they didn't know what Jedi they were going to pull in, and they said, okay, well, the fans are going to be really mad at us for getting rid of Grogu, so we have to bring in something to make everybody write about the Mandalorian online for weeks. And do you think that is something that comes into play, speaking of, fan service and whether people are going to like it or not? I'm just curious.
To be honest, I thought it was the opposite.
Really? Okay.
Of that, where the reason I was certain that it couldn't be Luke is because I knew if Luke shows up, Grogu has to go with him. You know what I mean? Like, you can't use Luke and not have Grogu go with him. Mm-hmm. Because what I wanted to see is a Jedi join them, and like the next season be like,
That would be
two
so cool.
two men and a baby type deal. But yeah. So I see it as the other way around, where they're like, all right, we'll bring in Luke, but then Grogu's gonna go.
I ultimately think he's not going to stay with Luke. I think there's a story thread there that kind of calls for Grogu to leave Luke. I just haven't found it yet. But I know a lot of people are pointing to this fact to I guess to summon up a plot hole that doesn't exist. And I do want to kind of put I just want to nip this in the bud. It's not a plot hole. Filoni and the story group are so good with canon and keeping everything in canon. They would not purposefully create a plot hole, especially when you consider what we've been discussing earlier in the podcast with Avar Kriss showing up in a holocron in Rise of Kylo Ren, meaning they've been planning for a long time. So the fact that Grogu isn't in Rise of Kylo Ren when Avar Kriss is, I do think that there's a chance for Grogu to have left. And I know that we've since then established that physiologically the species reaches maturity closer to 100, and like the first 5 decades is their infancy, and then afterwards they're just like boom 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 boom, they grow up. So my prevailing theory is that Grogu is going to reach a level of maturity that's not on the level of Yoda, right? Because he's not going to be 100. He's going to be 70. But he's going to be at least old enough to be a Padawan who is going on his trials, right? One of the trials being teamwork. So he goes off world with maybe a Jedi Master in Luke's academy. But another step of the trial is isolation. And so he needs to go off on his own and face his big bad, his big trial, as I've been saying, and come back a better Jedi. And that would be basis for him to become a knight. And, this is why this much is missing from that timeline. Because, not everyone was killed in that Jedi temple. The Padawans who weren't there survived, went on to chase Kylo to their end, but there could have been many other Jedis who were off-world also, either chasing down a kyber crystal or on their Jedi trials. So, at least for me, Grogu's not dead. This isn't the end of Grogu. And Din said, I'll see you again, I promise. So it's definitely not the end of the Lone Wolf and Cub show. For sure.
I agree. And I think that time away from Grogu to grow and for Din to grow is going to really benefit both of their characters. In the long run, I feel like they grew together and then they're going to grow more on their own and come to, maybe be fully without his mask, I think is what it's going to end up being. But I think that we will definitely see Grogu again in other material, but also in The Mandalorian, just not right away and not for very long, I don't believe. I think it'll be a little snippet, a little packet.
Yeah, I mean, I could see going to a point where perhaps Grogu's attachment to Din is a hindrance, and either he leaves to go back or we get something else. But I will say, and I've been catching flack for this, so I am the antagonist of this episode. As you guys know, I love The Last Jedi, and I love Luke, the characterization of Luke that we get there, and how he's kind of broken. And there was a lot of complaints when that movie came out of like, well, how could Luke get to this point? And like he would never consider anything with Ben or any of that stuff. But to me, if Grogu stays, that is the ultimate reasoning, right? Because a lot of people forget he's taking care of people's children and teaching them there at this temple. And he has a kid that is related to him there that keeps showing all this dark side stuff. And he's like, this could be problematic. He checks it out, has a vision. This is going to be problematic. Obviously, he can't, end it there. And that would be the wrong thing to do. But the next time he wakes up, the school is destroyed. I imagine if people can actually put those two items in their head at the same time of course he would never want to hurt Ben, but he promised, I will take care of Grogu with my life. That's what he promised to Din. And if he failed in those two things, and unstoppable force and an immovable object hit, that's enough to break a man, even Luke. It would perfectly explain if you lost Grogu. I mean,
yeah.
I live in San Diego and I'd be jumping off the Coronado Bridge myself. But I'm just saying that's where I stand on it.
I hate where you stand.
I don't want it to happen. But
I don't want Grogu die.
Just
it could just be that Luke thinks that. Luke could think that. I mean, we saw in The Last Jedi how, Luke's version of how things went is different from Ben's version of how things went too. So again, it could kind of be it could be both of those things together where he could think that he did lose Grogu or something.
Now
I mean, yeah.
I just have an image in my head. Okay, it's one of two things. Grogu is off world in his trials, and then the other Luke wakes up, the school's on fire, and there's small ass Grogu just running away from it, like he's survived.
Like E.T. running through the field.
Oh man, I really don't want to think that Grogu is. I want to think that he has a future with Din, and we don't even know the details of their physiological growth. Right, that book just said after 5 decades they exponentially grow, or they have their growth spurt and would have reached maturity. So even within 10-15 years before the school, he could very well be old enough to go on his Jedi trials. I mean, if you think about reaching a growth spurt within 50 years, and you think 15 years is enough for someone to be a knight in some respects, in some Jedi respects, it's not hard to think that.
I mean, I think about humans too, right? You are a literal child until you're like 12. Mm-hmm. And then now you may not have reached full maturity, but at 16 you've reached autonomy. Mm-hmm. Right? You can get a driver's license and a job and start doing stuff. You may not be a full-grown adult, but that's only, from 12 to 16 is 4 years. And that's, out of that total, that's a quarter of the time, right? So using the same math, like the exponential growth to Grogu actually becoming autonomous, or, knowing enough to kind of stand on his own, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. We have 20 years, or 19 to be specific, 19 years until that event plays out. So just let me think he's on his trials and he goes back to Din, and he's the Jedi that joins Din. And after all is said and done, after season 3 happens, and the Book of Boba, which we'll talk about later on, and the Rangers and Ahsoka, all that show happens, season 4 is a huge time jump. And Grogu comes back to Din.
Event across the Filoniverse.
He walks into the bar.
No, Grogu needs his own hallway scene.
Oh my gosh. Din's on like a prison barge, and he's the one that shows up that time. Oh man. Just the thought of a reunion between the two, with Grogu having gone from infant to like adolescent teenager. So now we move on to the another crux in this finale is the Darksaber. And Din has rightfully disarmed Gideon, and it is now in his possession. Now, there's a lot of videos out right now that are that's trying to explain the entire provenance of the Darksaber, but I mean, this is where we are. This is where we are. Din owns the Darksaber now by virtue of combat or duel, and Gideon has made this sort of, or thrown a wrench into the situation and said Bo-Katan can't just accept it. Now, I'm of the mind that she can, and I know a lot of people will argue, well, no, she has to earn it, it'll look weak. I'm like, maybe, but she already has. I don't know if the purge and the reign of the Empire is enough for all of the clans to suddenly lose hope in Mandalore. I'm curious to know what you guys think about this angle in the story, because I know for sure that they're not going to be antagonistic to each other. There's no willing bone in Din's body that wants to fight Bo-Katan, and Bo-Katan doesn't want to fight him. She just wants the Darksaber. But what do you guys think about this angle?
Now, to my knowledge, we don't know how Bo-Katan lost the Darksaber. Is that correct? Okay, so I feel like I keep seeing everyone use that word of plot hole because we know that in Rebels, Satine gives it to her. But I think that this was purposeful, and we will eventually find out how she lost the Darksaber. And I think that's going to be why she feels she needs to earn it. Personally. So I mean, we know she was given it once before, but I think it's the manner in which she lost it, and that's why she needs to earn it, and that's why Gideon used that against her.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and you know, I think you both saw it, but I made a post earlier saying, stop saying it's a plot hole. Like, Dave Filoni wrote that Sabine gave it to her. Yeah. It's not like, you know what I mean? All of the Mandalorian like lore that we're really getting, or most of it, is only canonized because of Dave Filoni. So I have a feeling, I could be wrong, but I think he has a good grasp of it. You know? So yeah, it's definitely not a plot hole. It's just a story we don't have yet, and we need to wait to have it unfold. But yeah, I see a lot of possibilities. My big thing is, to quote Starbuck, this has happened before and it'll happen again. Actually, it happened before. She was given the Darksaber. The clans were united. It didn't stick. Something happened. Mm-hmm. She is not currently ruling Mandalore with a bunch of united clans. So maybe whatever happened to prevent that is what she's trying to avoid. And while I don't believe at all there's any ill will or will be any, antagonistic, thoughts, I do believe Din is honorable enough that if she wants a fair duel for it, he will give her a fair duel, and he'll come at her with everything he has, because he understands that pride. But I mean, we shall see.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think if a duel does happen, it will be a friendly and honorable duel that is mutually agreed upon. It's not like she's gonna attack him like all of a sudden and they're just gonna be at odds with each other. I think he's going to honor Bo-Katan's wishes and give her a duel, and she just has to disarm him. It doesn't have to be a duel to the death, and that's certainly an easy way out of that situation. I'm
just thinking of Kanan training Sabine before she wielded it, and I could see kind of something even similar just like playing out, because obviously she knows that he's in such a an altered emotional state right now that it wouldn't happen right away. So I could see that building up to that.
Kanan is the true owner. He disarmed her. but yeah, I do want to poke fun at this really quickly. I just want like an air of levity that needs to happen. No one's there. Casca's there, but Casca's already, indentured to Bo-Katan, or at least in her service, and she's loyal. Take it and just be like, I want it. who's gonna like put her on trial and then test the testimonies? Just like really fun. Just discuss this really quick. What's the harm in her taking it and just telling everyone she won it from Din?
I'm just thinking of the Hamilton, like, nobody has to know. I mean, I agree. It seems kind of like an anticlimactic moment. Like, just do it. Who cares? But at the same time, maybe that would really undermine Casca's respect for Bo-Katan. So, and then it would kind of spread like dominoes to the other Mandalorians. That would be the only thing against it. But yeah, what's Moff Gideon gonna do? He's disarmed. He's knocked out.
Now, I mean, in my thoughts, their belief and their faith in themselves and the Mandalorians tribe and their strength, it's kind of like Spartan-like. It makes me think, but it feels like a religion to them, even though they may not have been devout as Din's group. It's something that they believe in for their own strength, and so maybe it's really a crisis of faith, just like Din had a crisis of faith. Sure, there were no repercussions, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have that belief. I don't know. Yeah,
there's a lot to think about in terms of where the Mandalorian can go from here. And to your point, Alex, I will say Casca already follows Bo-Katan without the Darksaber, so I don't know if her loyalty is as flimsy as like seeing her just take the Darksaber and be like, well, now I've lost all respect and I will no longer follow you. I don't know, but it is interesting to see, perhaps Axe, he wasn't there. Maybe Axe has a different viewpoint. But
Casca's a beast, by the way. I just had to point that out.
She whopped Boba Fett. Boba Fett thought, right? You thought, right? She literally, she was like, no, you're
this
coming
is not
over
going
here.
to go the way you think.
And just that, really quickly, that exchange between the Boba Fett and Bo-Katan, that was savage.
I loved it.
I've heard your voice hundreds of times before.
Yeah.
You're nothing to me.
I now I have to ask, because I've heard a lot of people like talking about that, and they're approaching it from the Mandalorian angle of like, yeah, because he's a clone, he's not really no, I don't think that's what she was talking about at all. She went and asked Ahsoka, help me take back Mandalore from Maul. Ahsoka rides in with a bunch of clones. They take the city, and what happens? Order 66, same day, they're already occupied by a bunch of clones. She just took back the planet. She's in charge, but now, boom, it's these, and she has to deal with all of these clones who are occupying her planet and they're now the Empire, now running the process of stripping it. That's where I come down on it, and that's why she was saying it, and probably has a lot of ill will, because every person that was screwing her over after that point was a clone. Oh, I was curious your thoughts on it, because I've heard it. I've heard someone saying that she was being racist towards clones or whatever.
That's a little odd.
I've heard a lot of different takes on it. That's mine.
No, I think she was. Look, she's Mandalorian. It's I think more so than he's a clone, it's what he's doing to that armor. You know, she says it in the episode, you're a disgrace to your armor. And although he tries to, you know, brush it off as it belonged to my father, and she's like, I don't care. That your father was a donor. Now, it wasn't expressly denied that Jango wasn't a Mandalorian. We still don't have that information either. But it seems to me that, like, a lot of people have really bad tastes in their mouths when it comes to Jango. Like, Almec's like, he's just a golden bounty hunter. And Bo-Katan is just like, your donor. Like, she doesn't really put Jango on a pedestal, or at least on a pedestal that even resembles a Mandalorian. And I'm wondering if, like, your status in the club is directly related to just how other Mandalorians perceive your way of doing things. Like, Jango might have joined the Mandalorians and then went off to go a bounty hunter and he became a Mandalorian, but what does that say if, like, society largely disregards his status as a Mandalorian because he doesn't care about Mandalore? He doesn't swear allegiance to Mandalore. And it's evidenced here too when Bo-Katan asks Boba, or not asks Boba, but they're talking about, hey, I need your help to take back Mandalore, and Din's like, I'll help you, and Boba's like, really? That's what you're gonna do? Like, I don't care about that planet. And so that's a definitive nail in the coffin for him being a Mandalorian. He doesn't care. This is largely off topic from where we are, but I would love some elaboration on thoughts on that as well. Just like the overall notion of Boba Fett and Jango Fett and how they treated Mandalore.
I still don't think Jango was a Mandalorian because there hasn't been anything in canon to say that he was a foundling. We don't know that he actually became a Mandalorian after that. And if he did, then, you know, Boba would be a Mandalorian by blood if he actually became one. Or, since you said your donor, he was adopted, so Boba would have been a foundling. He's been referred to as neither. So I feel like the evidence is against it still. But on top of that, even if he became one, he's clearly never cared about it. So yeah, are you always one? Because I can't believe that you are. Every single other Mandalorian we've ever seen has in some way, shape, or form been trying to do what they thought was best for the Mandalorian. Even the ones that joined the Empire thought, okay, it's better to be at the right hand of the devil than in his path. You have Sabine, who was trying to help but felt was even staying away because of how much, you know, she loves it. All of them care about him. We've never seen that from them.
Yeah, I would say his actions just never showed that loyalty to Mandalore, especially if we're looking at Mandalorians as not only a people, but as something they would choose, like a religion. It seems like such a small thing that people are going to nitpick about whether the Fets were, but it's a no for me.
I think we're all in agreement here, yeah. Which is a rarity in Star Wars to say. We're all in agreement. But I would just like to point out that his armor just has the Mythosaur insignia. It doesn't have any kind of other clan on there.
Oh, but no, that was another thought. She says, you're a disgrace to that armor. That armor. Does she personally recognize that armor? And if she does she recognize it from Jaster, who gave it to this non-Mando, and because he thought that this was going to be the next, you know, person, and then they weren't, and so she feels it's a personal disgrace. I don't, like, there's 1,000 different stories you can write, and I don't like to, you know, people come to me for information of lore and stuff like that. So I try not to say this stuff because I think people might run with it. But I think there could be a really interesting story if, we know that their armor is passed down. Sabine's armor was generations old.
But it's also reforged, right? It's also reforged for each Mandalorian. And so it could have just been, it could be that too, but it's almost something like I wish they would leave some things alone. I don't feel like we need a backstory in absolutely everything.
That's true. Star Wars. But I would love a story that just follows the armor. You know what I mean? The armor through different generations.
Vision, the armor of the Mandalorian.
Just saying.
But this also lends credence to, after that episode where they revealed that Jango was a foundling, a lot of people were saying, well, Almec was lying. Not necessarily true, because now that line in particular brings to bear what Almec said, which was, he's just your common bounty hunter. Where he got that armor, I have no idea. So if Jaster gave up his armor and Jango took it, and instead of becoming and joining Mandalorian society, he went off on his own and just said, screw it, that wouldn't make him a Mandalorian, and it would certainly revoke his membership from the club. And I say that because I was like, I don't know if you're always a Mandalorian. I think your membership can be revoked at any given moment.
I have seen people say, like you said, Almec was lying, but you can't disregard canon information to amplify Legends information. You know what I mean? You can't just choose what to ignore. But yeah, that's just me.
The final thing that we can talk about in terms of The Mandalorian is predictions for season 3. Now, of course, mine is pretty simple. He's got a deal. He's got his end of the bargain to uphold. The child's safe. So now he has to help Bo-Katan. In what way? I don't know. Maybe, just maybe, Bo-Katan wants to train him instead of be antagonistic. Maybe Bo-Katan sees a leader in him that could rule Mandalore. But the main point of my prediction is that Din is going to go off into Mandalore with, or go on to Mandalore with Bo-Katan, and our understanding of Mandalorian culture and society is going to grow exponentially. And that's the whole season. And it will run in tandem with Book of Boba Fett, which airs after that season finale.
I don't disagree. I mean, it's funny because when you go back, people are saying some of these episodes felt like filler to them. And for me, of course, it was interesting every step of the way, but it could very well lead to each episode of next season being building upon the story instead of going off on little side quests like this one sort of did, you could say. But I could definitely see it building up to a plot on Mandalore. I like the idea of her training him, but I don't know if it would be, for me, I feel like she would be skeptical, and I almost feel like I could see Bo-Katan using Din instead of kind of like bettering him. She's kind of not in a totally antagonistic way, but I could see her kind of molding him since she already knows he was molded from a certain point. But I definitely think they're going to go into Mandalore next season. I agree with you there.
Now, I don't think that it's going to start another civil war. I think Bo-Katan is pretty aware of the cost of a civil war. But do you think there's going to be a conflict between Bo-Katan, Din, and the coverts, who are largely zealots, and in trying to reach out to those cells, trying to bring Mandalorians back into, I guess, the mainstream of society? Do you think that could stand as a potential antagonist for season 3, where they're going around trying to recruit Mandalorians to take back Mandalore, and we have these coverts? It's just like, this is not the way. Could they go around trying to recruit them and then have this kind of internal conflict along the way with all of these different cells.
I mean, I think that's totally possible. That was actually also one of my predictions for season 2 is that, but I could see that happening, and Din having learned, these lessons, being the only person that could unite them, kind of like Aquaman uniting the surface world and the Atlantis world. So that could be cool. Also, can we also see this whole show as kind of an analogy for like single fatherhood, where Din is living this bachelor life, going off and doing his thing, and then he becomes this space dad, and he's having to figure it out. But the love for this child really just warms his heart, and then the child leaves, and he's gonna have empty nest syndrome going forward. But I think we could see some really beautiful stuff going forward, especially if he ends up finding more displaced children that need some sort of parent.
Yeah,
I like that idea. Yeah, because with his knowledge now and mixed with Bo-Katan, they could really work together. But she couldn't have done it without him, because he has all this experience with breaking away from the cult-like mentality essentially that he was raised with, and from one person to another, it's a little bit more relatable than just another Mandalorian who hasn't had to deal with it their whole life or raised with it that way. So that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, I know I said that, or I suggested that she train Din, but it's going to be really difficult for me to let go of Bo-Katan being the heiress. It's just like I agree. Din has the most or Din makes the most sense coming from the cult, or coming from that side of Mandalorian society, and then going into mainstream Mandalorian society and kind of having that experience and bringing people together on that front. But I don't know. I have like Queen Daenerys vibes with Bo-Katan. I just want her to rule Mandalore again.
Luke in general, and how it's bridging a gap for different fans that wanted to see that crazy overpowered Luke they missed in The Last Jedi. And I don't know like how I feel about it overall, but that's kind of another story. It interestingly enough, because this is like a little tangent and then I'll stop, but I'm someone who
Go on a tangent.
Okay. I'm someone who kind of like Choco could like see what led Luke to be the way he was in The Last Jedi, and I appreciated that, and I could see how his character developed. But for instance, my husband, who grew up like many Star Wars fans in general who have gripes with the sequels, he idolized Luke and looked at him in a certain way. And so even though he's come to terms with it, he still didn't really see, that wasn't the gratification that he wanted from his childhood of seeing Luke that way. And so I feel like for a lot of fans, and I've seen this on social media, seeing Luke in his heyday has kind of almost rectified that and made it easier for them to digest the way that he is in the sequels. So I think overall it's a good thing, but there is like a line for me with like fan service, and of course you can't make everyone happy, but I think it met it in a nice way that can kind of hopefully keep all parties happy, even though some people will always find something to complain about, of course.
Absolutely. We actually got Luke in his prime, which is something I have always wanted to see.
Yeah.
And people are like, but his face is wrong. I hate it. And you're like,
oh my gosh.
No, stop it.
They're missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, someone said his eyes were dead or something because of the CGI. I was watching back your reactions from when you all watched it together, and someone said his eyes were dead and it really bothered them. And I was like...
And it's just true. He was a little wooden. But after rewatch, he looks a lot better just the second time I watched it. The same show. It's not like they changed it. Yeah. It's expectation versus reality, I think, is what it is.
Yeah.
Me putting on a tinfoil hat, they're slowly improving it every time and uploading the new version every day. And the next time you watch that episode, it's going to be a true deep fake of Sebastian Stan or something. And by the time they reach the episode, or by the time they announce a Luke show, a Prime Luke show, they will have fully put Sebastian Stan in that episode.
They'll have remastered the Mandalorian finale.
They have the technology to do that.
We have the technology.
So really quickly before we move on to our final Q&A segment, just brief idea on where do you think Book of Boba is going to go? Like, obviously, he's on the throne at Jabba's palace now. He killed Bib Fortuna. He's got Fennec Shand with him. What are his plans? You know, is it to rebuild Krait's Claw? Is it to take over Nar Shaddaa and the crime world? What are you guys' thoughts on where Boba goes in his story?
My only thought so far, I haven't had too much, is just that it's going to be a short series, and I could very well be proven wrong, but I feel like given the time frame, it's going to be almost like a mini series the way that the Kenobi show is, but not like a multi-season thing. That's kind of, it's going to be like one story. It'll play out, give us more Boba Fett that the fans have been asking for years, and then be done with it. But I could be totally wrong on that front.
I have no idea, because
yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I love storytelling and deep lore and character development. That's like my big thing. At this point, Boba has none of those. So, like, okay, so he took over Jabba's palace. Has he ever shown a desire to rule or run anything? Like, I hope, and I'm sure it'll be great because Boba Fett is Jon Favreau's favorite character.
Yeah.
But I hope it's not. I hope it has heart and it's not just badass pew pew pew. I hope we really develop some stuff. But I have to say, Ming-Na Wen's like smirk as
she's chugging.
As they walk in, kill a bunch of people, the bodies are all still there, and then she just like grabs it, sits on the chair, and like has this smirk. Is, I don't know, it's just classy, and I am happy that she's still getting work and kicking ass. Our Mulan, who is also the cavalry, who is now, yeah, I love it.
She's definitely slowly becoming one of my favorite characters out of The Mandalorian. Just the way Ming-Na Wen plays her. And I'm sure we're going to learn more about her from the Bad Batch, as evidenced by the trailer. Yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right though. Like, Boba Fett came into Star Wars and Empire, and then next died in Return. And suddenly everyone loved him for, I'm going to be real with you guys, for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
He had a really cool costume.
Yeah, he was a great cosplay to do at the cons. But when you asked, so like, what is it about Boba? And this is before open seasons and all the comics, and people would just be like, he's just cool.
To quote It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it's the implication.
Yeah,
there's this implication that he's cool because of how he talks to Vader, and then how, no one talks back to Vader, but Boba kind of does. And so if you have Vader's respect, I don't need to know what you do.
Right.
I don't want to know. But there's that. Also, his first appearance, of course, was not in Empire. Its first appearance was in the holiday special, and he rode a big sea dinosaur. That was kind of cool. But
that
yeah,
was kind of cool, wasn't it?
He was meant to sell toys, and that he did.
So yeah, I mean, but you're right though. He doesn't have any character besides he holds his father's armor to high respect, and now he's sitting on the throne. And he was honorable enough to help Din until he got the child back. But now his character is just as Alex says, a short book, a short 3-chapter book.
Why does he want Tatooine? I don't understand. I'm sure we'll get it, and I can't wait till we do.
But like the bigger implication of him, the idea of him rebuilding Krait's Claw is whether or not we would see Cad or Embo or Bosk in his show. Because again, that scene from Clone Wars it's not canon, so Cad's technically alive, Embo is alive, Bosk is alive. Is he rebuilding Krait's Claw? And I think sitting on the Hutt throne had huge implications for me on whether or not we would see him kind of try to be a crime lord on Nar Shaddaa, and we would see that aspect of Star Wars, because we haven't really seen too much of it, Okay, so moving on to our final segment of this episode is our fan Q&A. So this is where we field questions from you guys, our audience, and try to answer them.
So there was a question from user The Man Behind the Slaughter. Did Ahsoka ever meet Luke?
I feel like now we have that possibility a little bit more so with what just happened in The Mandalorian.
I mean, in Secrets of the Jedi, he describes her. So is that from like some kind of history book that knows about Ahsoka, or does he briefly meet her? And Alex is right. Like, the fact that he is in The Mandalorian could very well mean that they do meet eventually, or they have met already.
Yeah, maybe they've met and it's not like a big event in Star Wars. It could be a very casual thing, just like we were talking about the mention of a Togretta in Thrawn in passing. It could be just a little throwaway that makes people happy, but isn't a huge deal too.
I mean, so again, like we said, we don't know, but I would love for them to meet next in the Ahsoka show. And maybe at the end, it could be like even a season 2 thing where she's looking for Ezra and she finally finds him and is like, there's someone you should meet. And she's actually talking about Grogu, and they go find Grogu and Luke's there, and they're like, oh, hey dude, who are you?
Oh, kind of like so do you think Luke was answering the call and went to Tython and Ahsoka was there and it's like, you need to go here or something, and they met before Luke showed up?
That's not what I was leaning towards, but that would be cool as well.
I mean, yeah, it's certainly possible that they had met, but we don't have canon references to confirm that, so that's the best you got, They could have. Luke knows about her in his notes. K-Day31 asks, how come the First Order didn't have Dark Troopers? Is this the last of the Dark Troopers? Is like the plans just kind of got lost with Gideon?
I don't believe at all that Gideon is working with or for the First Order. I believe he is working with and for the Final Order, and the First Order itself has not been conceived yet. All of the research and things that he was doing, and by the way, they are grasping at straws to still have any resources at all with these Imperial remnants.
Yeah.
But of course, with the research, it'll probably be jumping out beyond the outer rim to give this research to Palpatine's Sith scientist or whatever. Whereas the First Order develops separately, while the Final Order is spying on it, it develops separately. It's its own thing, has its own modern technology.
I would say, I think that sounds very plausible. And also I'm thinking about how in in Rebels when all of the factory kind of blew up and got rid of that technology, because they're already grasping at straws for these materials in the universe. It might be one of those types of situations where the plant where they were made blew up. It could have been, a number of things. We saw how Luke really went right through the Dark Troopers with one lightsaber, so maybe they are only useful in certain situations and not when there are Jedi. But I think it's more likely that it was either blown up or that, again, it was something that wasn't needed at that point.
I have a question from Jarrett, Idaho 96. He asks, if Mace survived, what would he do outside of being in the Jedi Order? I just like this question because it has so many possibilities. Like, he could become a used car salesman, a used speeder salesman, and you just like, get in the car, mother.
Well, that's why we didn't see him. They're saving him for the crossover between Ahsoka and Rangers and the Mandalorian.
He's the big bad.
Yeah.
Well, I just did a video on this. I personally think he's dead, but if he did survive, but man, like, answering this question leads me to think he's dead. Because, like, if he did survive, he'd be leading the charge against Palpatine and the Empire. I don't see, especially with someone with Mace's constitution, I don't see him kind of surviving and just not doing anything, just kind of chilling, or, as you say, becoming a speeder salesman, or being a swoop racer or something. He would have joined the rebellion.
Yeah, I mean, I see him as someone that would absolutely die for his principles. Or he could replace his missing hand with a spatula and go on Iron Chef. I don't know.
Have you been to the robot flipping burger joint in Pasadena?
No.
I need to take you there sometime.
Should I? Okay.
It's pretty funny, but it's not Mace Windu flipping burgers. Maddie the Archivist says, what are your thoughts on the soundtrack this season?
Everyone's going off about that Dark Trooper song, but I love it's great, but I love every time there's a variation of the Mandalorian theme. I feel like it is honestly one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars music, which feels blasphemous to say, but it gets me excited. It's a good tune.
Also, I haven't heard anyone talk about the intro was different this time. You guys noticed that, right?
It wasn't the same.
The theme that plays when the title card rolls up. It was different on this. It was like a re-record, but with more major keys, and there was like more brass elements in it. I know that it struck me. I was like, wait, what?
I have to watch it. I have to watch it again.
Maybe I'm crazy and I imagine all of that, but I'm pretty sure it was different.
Yeah, I have to watch it again because as I was filming my live reaction, I was talking while it was happening. I was like, oh, is something going to happen? I'm prepared for nothing to happen. But two of my favorite Star Wars pieces of all time came out of this. Which is odd to say, right? Because it's still kind of young in my mind. But the music that plays when Grogu is on the Seeing Stone was amazing. And the music that plays for Luke when he's fighting, coming down the hallway, that's also a great masterpiece. And I don't remember the name of the composer off the top of my head, but he's just done a tremendous job with creating this soundscape for Mandalorian that isn't John Williams. John Williams always is Star Wars, but when you take when you've created something equally as Star Wars, but just not the Force theme, you've got something there. I think the soundtrack was just absolutely amazing.
I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, I guess, who was it? Giacchino did Rogue One, right? Mm-hmm. But it was still John Williams-esque. You know what I mean? this is its own thing, but it's still very Star Wars. And it actually took me a little bit. It took me a little bit to get used to it, but now I love it. Fish go blub blub. It says, this feels like a dumb question, but what are Inquisitors? And first of all, there are no dumb questions. So it doesn't matter when you became a fan. Not everyone is as big of a loser as I am and reads all the books and stuff. So there are no dumb questions. But
we literally make our content off of questions. So I might be hyperbolic here, and you can correct me if you know better, but I do believe that all Inquisitors were fallen Jedi who had joined to serve Sidious in helping to hunt down remaining surviving Jedi after Order 66 who had not turned. And of course, the most famous of them all was Grand Inquisitor, who was a temple guard. And you can see him fight Jocasta Nu a little bit in the Darth Vader 2017 comic run. But I think that's the short of it. They were just the Jedi who had fallen, right? And just kind of joined to hunt their brethren.
They're no longer Jedi, but they're not, of course, like fully Sith either. They're working for the Sith. That's how I took it too.
Yeah, and one of my favorite examples, I mean, it was quite short-lived, but the 10th Brother. If you read there's a Mace Windu comic where he's a Mayor Luca, the ones without eyes.
Yeah.
But Jays have a really strong connection to the Force. And during that mission, he starts to disagree with the Council. He thinks that Mace is holding things back on him and fights him right then and there. So they arrest him. And we don't see him again until the Vader 2017 run, where he is the 10th Brother. He's the one that is dual-wielding lightsabers. We see more of that in Jedi Fallen Order. And it's hinted at in dialogue. So I do believe all of them are, but it's possible, like you said, that's slightly hyperbolic. So I don't know. I'll stick with it.
Yeah, we don't have any canon references to if any of them were just kind of sabers for hire.
Which also makes me quite disappointed because it leads me to believe that Pong Krell could have been one, and he would have been horrifying as an Inquisitor. Emery
J3 asks, who do you think will be the first death out of the main characters in Mando?
Hera.
She has her own show, right? Is Rangers?
Is it her? I feel like she's part of it, but I don't think it's her show, right? Isn't it?
We haven't gotten confirmation, but that's like logical.
I don't see it being just her show. I feel like they might even bring like Cobb Vanth back in, and some of the characters we saw, I think on episodes 2 and 4, like Paul, I forget his last name. Yeah. From who I'm talking about from Kim's Convenience. I feel like we're gonna get like those guys. I feel like are gonna be a big
watch
part
Kim's
of the
Convenience.
show.
That's awesome.
It's a great show.
It is a good show. I'm going with Grief Karga. I think Carl Weathers is gonna kick the bucket.
He'll just stick to directing.
I'd have to agree. I think Grief is the most. I hate to say this. He's the most expendable.
This question comes from Jordan Wiz, and he asks, how did Palpatine hide his Force abilities from the Jedi?
I mean, the short answer is Force concealment, right? Yoda says it in The Phantom Menace. Difficult to see the dark side is. So anything that's clouded by the dark side is for sure difficult to kind of comprehend. I think all of the Jedi throughout the prequels have been kind of aware of a looming shadow. They can't see through it, and Sidious is that powerful.
Agree on all fronts. I think that he's also, because of all the death and destruction that's happening throughout the galaxy, the shift in power is heading towards the dark side, which also makes it more difficult to pinpoint. But on top of that, my mind goes straight back to A New Hope, where Vader is on Luke's tail and he's going to shoot. And then that's when you hear, use the Force, and he turns off his computer, reaches out with the Force, and right then Vader says, the Force is strong with this one. So I also believe a big part of it is actively using the Force as well. I think untrained people, you can tell the Force is strong because they aren't actively trying to hide it or project it. But I think also, like, if he was constantly using it, they'd probably catch wind.
Yeah. And he did a good job of not using it at all. He's just pulling Anakin's strings and that's it.
Politics, man.
Tragedy of Darth Plagueis asks, do you think Ezra has turned evil? Or at least start using the dark side because of Thrawn?
Why? From being stuck with Thrawn.
Like, he's so irritating.
Yeah.
That was just funny. Why?
Why?
Oh.
I have to say no, because but it's part of the misconception that Thrawn is just an evil or just a bad guy, versus he's an antagonist to them in Rebels. But yeah, you put them on some sort of, they're stranded together, they're gonna be real good friends. Well, Ezra's kind of stubborn. It might take a while, but
yeah. I don't think Ezra has it in him to turn. He was getting ready to be groomed by Darth Maul, and eventually rebukes that attempt as well. Just like all Jedi, they have small brushes with the dark side, and it's up to them to be better than Anakin.
And who's to say that wherever Ezra and Thrawn are, that he isn't getting some of the Force ghosts talking to him and guiding him in some ways too. We don't know yet.
Absolutely.
Read Star Wars books. You will like it.
Yes, definitely. Read books. Like we get often asked, like, hey, how do you know all this stuff? And you're like, yeah, if you're reading the second Thrawn book, you learn a lot about traveling through hyperspace. It's just a byproduct. And when people ask you questions on it, you're like, you just know the answer. Also follow Alex. She's great. I love her content.
Tell me other things that I should read, and I will read them and discuss them for you.
You could read Echoes of the Past.
Is that an EU book?
It's my book.
Oh yeah, that is your book. I read I listened to the prologue. Yes, I know that's why you like Bo-Katan so much. I was like, she's your plan for after the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, the chapter 1 is also out, and I just today received all of my lines that I needed for chapter 2, so that will also be in production.
How far have you written in advance, or are you done?
You've
written chapter 5, right?
Yeah, I've written up to chapter 14, and I have a rough draft to the finish of the book. I still kind of need to consult with Chaco on his bit when I get to fully flesh that out more, but I'm interested to see where he wants to take it, because
are you guys writing it together, sort of?
He has a small little, I guess,
ghost
writer. A small little credit for some ideas, but it helped connect some things for us. So
yeah.
To answer your question, no, but I'm a part of it.
I mean,
I feel like, as from like a writing standpoint, I've not written any original works, but it must be hard to not let like new information that comes out affect your writing, unless you are purposely doing that so that it fits in with the canon. But how do you feel that you don't let it affect you and your story?
It's tough. It's tough to. I don't have the story group on speed dial, so I can't really be like, is this canon? Yeah. Does this work? Is this lore accurate? Am I breaking anything? Right. So largely, I'm taking some creative liberties with the Force for sure, kind of create my own mythology. Everything that I base my new mythology on has some precedence, in current canon. And so a lot of the new stuff that I'm exploring has a lot to do with World Between Worlds, which is something we don't know a lot about.
Right.
So there's my freedom there. But also, surprisingly, if you read chapter 1, I don't know, have you both read chapter 1 or no?
I haven't. I listened to part of it, but I didn't. I have a toddler. That's my excuse for everything. He came in.
I read it when you posted it on the Discord. Like, it was one of the very first things. So it's been a while. So I'll have to...
that's definitely an early draft. But if you watch the chapter 1 video that I posted, that's like the final thing. You'll find that what I wrote for the Mandalorians happened on the Mandalorian. And okay. I was hoping that with the Mandalorian, if they ever brought in Bo-Katan and explained the helmet thing and the purge and all of that, I was hoping that it wouldn't contradict what I wrote. And luckily, I published that in July. And so people can't be like,
that's awesome.
Well, people can't be like, I wrote this, after they revealed it. And like, no, I called it. I called all of these coverts and having the helmet thing being a separate thing, and that it was after the purge. Right. I'll let you guys read it if you want to read it. But okay, that'll do it for this episode of Dyad in the Force. I want to thank Darth Choco always for being my co-host, and I want to thank whythxfriend for appearing on Dyad in the Force. Where can people find you on your socials?
I am just on TikTok, whythxfriend with an X.
Okay, and she does book recommendations for Star Wars, and I think she may even, this is my suggestion at least, to do other books as well, as she has done to us with the Firebird series. Go follow her and give her some love. She's relatively new to the community, and I wanted to welcome her with open arms and just kind of, try to expand our community in a way that eventually the positive voices of Star Wars eclipses the negative voices of Star Wars.
Well, I mean, that's how the Empire wins. They make you think that you're alone. Absolutely. But there's more of us. There's more of us.
The strongest stars have the hearts of Kyber. But with that said, this is the end. On to the next one, and may the Force be with you.